Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Zero Waste Cafe. We are very excited to have you here tonight. We can see you, but we can feel your incredible energy through our screens. My name is Erica Reyes. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Inuit, a startup that is looking to question the ordinary things we do every day that don't make sense, like disposable takeout waste. Do you also love takeout but want to make the world a better place? What if we could support local restaurants without compromising our ecosystems and we were rewarded for it? We are launching an, one second. Here. We are launching a zero waste food app that is supporting a reusable container system. You will be able to order ahead for a contactless pickup. Receive your food warm in an insulated container at no extra cost, and earn rewards for taking action. If this is something that you are interested in, follow us on Instagram @InuitApp. Sign up to our mailing list and share your favorite spots in the city to stay up to date on the launch details. Inuit is a zero waste food app, but we are more than that. We care deeply about you, the environment, and many things. The Zero Waste Cafe is part of our Climate Connection section, a space designed to open discussions about climate and us. Last year, I met an incredible human, and we started the Zero Waste Cafe together. Now, she is our Chief Marketing Officer at Inuit. I will pass it over to Adriana. She will share a little bit more about how the Zero Waste Cafe started.
Thank you, Erica. And again, hello to everyone, and thank you for letting us get everything set up. Again, as Erica mentioned, my name is Adriana Kudo, and I am the CMO of Inuit and a founding partner of the Zero Waste Cafe alongside Erica. So when we started our journey, we were both feeling quite isolated in that. We didn't have a lot of friends or family at that point who were really kind of into it and understood our lifestyle choices and why we were so concerned with the current climate crisis. And it was that feeling that led us to create this series, a space to connect with other green minds in the city. And the intention behind the space was really to bring people together who have the same concerns about personal carbon footprint and waste production in a really inclusive and non-judgmental space. We were having them in person before. This is a little bit different for us. This is our second virtual event and second multiple speaker format, which we couldn't be more excited about. We're really excited to share this space with all of you and all of the incredible guest speakers that are here this evening to share their expertise around this topic. And before we begin, I would love to pass it over as well to Ramel Bellasino. He is the mobilization campaigner in Toronto for Greenpeace Canada to share a land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Let's take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral and traditional territories that we are calling in from today. So since we aren't in the same place, feel free to write your name and the territory you're in, like on the chat, so we can situate ourselves collectively. And for me, here in Toronto, I want to acknowledge the land I'm living and learning on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. This specific territory is also governed by One Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which is a treaty that defines this land as a space that we need to share and take care of for all. I also want to acknowledge Indigenous people's role in the struggle for climate and social justice, as they are the ones who are in the first, who are first to experience the detrimental effects of climate change and the ones leading the way for change. Providing this land acknowledgement is a small amount of, but important step to the process of reconciliation and building a positive relationship with Indigenous peoples. It is a time to reflect on systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their lands and deny their rights to self-determination. At this time, we also want to be reminded of the police violence against Indigenous people, violent and racist attacks on Six Nation land defenders, Wet'suwet'en, the Micmac fishers, and the government inaction on the missing and murdered Indigenous women. These are the things that we can't ignore now or ever, and must match our acknowledgement of the land and injustice with action. I'll also share a link in the chat, an anti-racist environmental action toolkit that is put together by Greenpeace. Thank you again for joining us today or tonight, and have a great evening. Back to you, Erica.
Thank you so much, Ramel. And thank you for sharing that anti-racist environmental action toolkit. Before we dive in, I will quickly share just a few housekeeping tips with everyone. Again, firstly, just thank you so much for showing up and sharing this virtual space with us. It means a lot that you're here to have this conversation. All participants will be in watch-only mode and will be muted to ensure that we can hear the discussion and the conversation happening among the panelists very clearly. If you do have questions, there is a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Please type them into the question box. We will be moderating those questions periodically, and they will be presented to the panel before or during the Q&A session. And lastly, this is being recorded. It will be sent out as well. A link to this will be sent out to all participants by the end of the week. Any links that were added into the chat box, please use that chat box down there. If you have anything you would like to share, we will also send out all of that information to you so that you can all keep in touch and learn about each other's projects. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it off actually to Wendy, who is our special projects assistant. She is going to introduce all of our expert guest speakers tonight. So Wendy, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Hi, everyone. So as Adriana said, I'm Wendy. So for tonight's panel, we specifically chose each panelist to so that we have a multiple perspectives, so that our conversation is a well-rounded one. So without further ado, let's first introduce our first panelist. So here we have Sarah King. She is the head of Greenpeace Canada's Ocean and Plastic Campaign, based in Vancouver on unceded Coast Salish territories. So for 13 years, Sarah has channeled her passion for environmental justice and protection into campaigns that tackle some of the biggest threats to ocean biodiversity and coastal communities, including overfishing, plastic pollution, and the climate crisis. Next up, we have Pedro Afif, a coach and trained psychotherapist with a decade of experience helping people from all walks of life to develop self-awareness, confidence, and emotional intelligence. He is very passionate about helping his clients embrace change, build resilience, and understand emotional intelligence, helping them to find and sustain emotional balance in time of stress, especially right now. So then we also have Tony Sappong, a family physician working in the shelter system in Toronto. She's also the co-founder of PlasticFree Toronto, a social media platform that educates people on multiple environmental and social issues. She understands the connection between human health and planetary health, and is therefore a very passionate advocate for human access to healthy environment. And we have a final panelist here is Aurore Courtieux-Boinot. She is the co-founder of Tasse, that is under the foundation, under the organization of Lavag, and also a specialist in circular economy and waste management at Coop Incita. She developed Tasse in 2018, which is a reusable cup deposit program that has now spanned a network of more than 350 shops. Very impressive. And the project was immediate success, apparently, and it led to the creation of Lavag in 2019. So now she leads Lavag, an organization dedicated to the eco-responsibility of the restaurant sector. Last but not least, our moderator for today is Emily Alfred. She is the senior campaigner at the Toronto Environmental Alliance. She's a local waste expert working on advocacy for zero waste policies and programs in Toronto and Ontario. This includes community education, policy research, and advocacy at both the municipal and provincial level. Emily works collaboratively with national, provincial, and community-based environmental and health groups to provide a unified environmental voice on provincial waste policy. So now I will pass it on to Emily, and thank you again for joining us and helping to guide tonight's conversation.
Great, thanks, Wendy. Hi, everybody. I'm pretty excited to see that we have so many Adrianas here, and also people from all across Canada and some places in the US. This is really great. So I'm super happy to be talking about waste and garbage. It's what I do. I love it. I find it really interesting. It's something that we can all really relate to. I think one of the things I like about waste as an environmental issue is that at some point in the day, everyone's got something in their hands and they have to decide, does it go in the garbage bin, the recycling bin, the organics bin, or somewhere else? And that's why every one of us can relate to it. But waste also speaks to much, much bigger climate change and sustainability and consumption systems. So it's accessible, but it's also a really good window into bigger issues. So I'm happy to talk about that. So as you all know, we're here to talk about reusables tonight. And we're primarily talking about reusable containers for takeout food and groceries. And I don't know about you, but considering this pandemic right now, I'm getting a lot more takeout food. I feel like, I'm too tired to cook a lot of the time. I also feel like it's my responsibility to shop at local restaurants and get takeout and order food from restaurants. But of course, with that comes a lot of takeout containers and real questions around what is all this stuff that our food is coming in? And is this the best way to get our food? And this new amounts of waste, some of it's recyclable, some of it isn't. So I've been grappling with these questions. Even though I'm kind of an expert on this, I still find it really confusing and overwhelming to figure out what to do on a daily basis. So we've got this great panel of experts, and I'm gonna hit you guys with some good questions to sort of get this conversation going and think about what this means. So for the first question, I'm gonna go straight to Tony as the medical professional among us. Right now, we're all facing a really frightening global health situation. And we're all thinking about health and how to stay safe and how to reduce contact and transmission between people. Can you just tell us, is it really safe to use reusables during COVID-19?
Thank you for the question, and thanks to the Zero Waste Cafe for having me. So yes, to your point, it is a tough time for everyone, and these are important concerns. I think the bottom line that I want to really emphasize is that yes, reusables are safe. And I'm going to talk, if that's okay, just a little bit about some of the science, because I think that's where it's gotten a little bit hairy for people. So when the pandemic first started, there was a lot of discussion around how long COVID was remaining on surfaces. So like some of you probably heard like, oh, it can stay on surfaces for up to 3 days. Then another study came out, said up to a week. Seemed like plastic and stainless steel were worse than other materials. And so there was all these sorts of concerns about like, oh my goodness, we need to disinfect everything and everything needs to be in like very proper sanitized packaging, et cetera, et cetera. That was the beginning of the pandemic when we really knew very little about COVID. Luckily now it's been, we're getting close to a year, unfortunately, and we have a lot more information. And what's really important to understand is that those studies did not look at all at whether or not the COVID that was found on surfaces could in fact infect other people, which is the main question that we really need to answer when we're doing these studies. So now we have a lot more information about what happens when COVID is on surfaces in everyday life. And as it turns out, there's been no documented cases or no conclusive evidence to suggest that there is actually transmission from a surface to a person. So it's really important to understand there's very low risk from any of the surfaces we're touching in terms of how people are getting coronavirus. The reason people are getting coronavirus is because when we talk and sing and like exist and breathe, we breathe out droplets, which contain this virus that can then infect people. It's the getting the droplets into you that's the real problem. once it's on surfaces, it doesn't seem to be viable, which means it cannot infect other people. It seems to degrade too quickly in the environment. So that's, I think, a really important thing to understand. And I think it hopefully will provide some reassurance that like we literally have no evidence that touching things, including reusables, is a risk to your health.
That's a fantastic answer. That's really reassuring. And I don't know if anybody else did this, but for a little while, the beginning of the pandemic, I was like wiping down groceries every time I brought them in the house. And I still get a little bit nervous about those kinds of things, but it's really reassuring to hear that, the evidence has changed and we now know a lot more about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Based on that, I guess a follow-up question for you, if anyone else wants to jump in, have any public health authorities in Toronto and Canada actually banned the use of reusable containers or put restrictions on using reusables?
Not to my knowledge. So I took a deep dive into like Public Health Ontario's guidelines and Toronto Public Health's guidelines, just because they were the most relevant to me. And certainly none of them are recommending any ban on reusables at all. I haven't heard anything at the national level either. I know the CDC in the US said, again, like any contact transmission is quite an unlikely way of getting coronavirus. And again, they haven't recommended avoiding reusables for that reason. So really there's no public health agency that's recommending we avoid them.
Great.
That I'm aware of.
Okay, cool, thanks. Sarah, I saw you shaking your head to that. Did you have something to add to what authorities have said across Canada?
Yeah, no, definitely. What I've looked into, it's the same thing. They're not outright saying don't use reusables. What we have seen a little bit of, though, are recommendations around the use of single use in restaurant settings. So it's almost the opposite. But those aren't requirements. They're more guidelines that, for example, here in B.C, we've seen the government put out. But they're not saying don't use reusables. They're just, saying that potentially in some situations, single use options could be safer, which I think also, is problematic in a different way.
That's a really great point. Aurore, do you want to respond to that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's just that in Quebec, unfortunately, well, it was not banned or anything, obviously, but unfortunately, we had recommendations towards the fact to do not accepting plates and things from outside. So that was a big problem because it kind of freezed everyone. And yeah, like as Tony said, it looks like reusable were not looked at through facts and science. They were looked at through perceptions. And everybody kind of freaked out, especially when Starbucks decided to stop the ball and prevent anybody from coming in with a reusable item. Then the coffee shop owners, they were all like, well, what if I'm the only one to accept it? And then there's a problem. And obviously they had so many things going on at the moment, and they still do, like they're little employees and there are all kind of problems at the moment. So it's unfortunately, it sounds like disposable. We know it, like nobody got sick so far, so maybe it's better. And that is the biggest problem, because it's like what we feel towards disposable, we think that we should feel the opposite towards reusable. Like, oh, if disposable is safe, then reusable is not safe. But that is not the good question. That is not the right equation. The good question is not, are you serving me in disposable or reusable? The good question is, what is the process? Was your process clean? Was your process okay in terms of sanitation? And that is, in my opinion, where the problem is lying, is that we kind of do not ask the proper question, because that is very funny when you think about the fact that disposable is a surface. So what, like viruses are like allergic to disposable surfaces? No, they're not. Viruses can spread to surfaces, and we don't even ask the question if surfaces then can spread to them. As Tony explained very clearly, and it's not my field, so I'm not going to repeat that. But it's funny how in a way, we see disposable surfaces as they are not surfaces. They are, and they can be non-clean as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. That actually, I think I'd like to hear, Pedro, your perspective on this from like I guess the sort of the mentality that has us, so many people ready to believe that disposables are safe, reusables are unsafe. Is this just human fear? Is this something that we're being told? Like, is this a lie that's being told to us?
I really think that Aurore hit the nail on the head with this one, because I would say that the fact is, it is an illusion that the disposable is safer than the reusable, because it is not about the packaging; it's about what you do with it, right? But as human beings, we perceive, and again, I'm not an expert in reusables or packaging, but human perception is very simple. We perceive threat from like collective consciousness, right? Like, so for like common knowledge. And if everyone is saying that surfaces are dangerous, right? And we are used to seeing disposables like packaged and ready to toss. So that reduces the amount of contact that we have with the disposable, and we perceive that it is less dangerous than a surface that, like my mug, I will keep and I will have to wash. Right, so again, it's only the illusion of it being safer, because disposables are surfaces as well.
Tony, I see you want to jump in here and add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, to Pedro's point, like, I think there's like the aspect of like the perception of danger that's obviously a motivating factor here, but I also think just in terms of like when we clean things or like when we dispose things, like that's an action that we're taking in a very uncertain time, where it sort of feels like no one really has the right answer on like what they should be doing, or like, you know, public health messaging is confusing. We feel unsafe. Like, it's really important that people have things that they can do tangibly in their lives, which I think is why things like single use and disposables have become so, and like massive cleaning of surfaces have become so attractive, because it's just like one more thing that we can actually do to feel like we're in control of a very threatening situation. So I think it's understandable where this is all coming from. And I think like once you have that already ingrained in your mind that like there's a danger to you, it's really hard to then be like, oh, but all the evidence now says it's okay, so I can relax. Like that's a difficult transition for people to make, understandably.
Yeah, for sure. And then again, like as you say, I like when it is my responsibility to clean my dishes, my mug, my whatever, we don't have like exact protocols of how it should be, or is it clean enough? Am I doing it right? And even though there are like COVID approved chemicals and whatever, you don't really know. And that's why I think that at times we perceive that a disposable is something that is safer just because it reduces the contact that you have with it, and then you like put it out of your mind, and something that we do.
Sarah, I saw you nod your head a little bit, and I think I know what it was about some of the sources of this is not just our personal fear, but some lies that we've been told. Do you want to comment on that?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we've been told the story for a long time that plastic is safe, that it protects us from, all sorts of things, that it, prevents food waste, that it keeps food hygienic, that it creates this magical barrier. And that, without plastic packaging, the products that we buy every day, won't be sanitary. And we've definitely seen the industry ramp up this messaging during the pandemic and really use this moment to double down on that story. And it's created a lot of confusion, not just with consumers and the public, but also with companies who, haven't yet really dug into the research in their plastic reduction journey and have been told this story, by the companies that they buy from. that plastic really is what they need to keep their products in. And so it's really difficult to undo that work. And, we even recently, with the federal government coming out with their proposed ban and their integrated management plan, even in that press conference, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change was reinforcing this narrative that we need plastic to keep us safe during the pandemic, and it serves all these really important functions, especially again related to food waste and keeping us safe, etc. So, it's really hard for the public to know who to believe and to make choices when really plastic is just everywhere all the time, and we're being told it needs to stay that way.
So, Aurore, I know you operated Tasse, which is a cup sharing program. So people can take a cup from one restaurant, use it. Can they drop it off at another restaurant? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
So how do you face this question that might come from restaurant owners or, people who want to take part in the program? How do you convince them that reusables are safe? Or what sorts of questions are you hearing from restaurants?
Well, it's been hectic. We heard everything. Like in the very beginning, it was very difficult because it was a case of, how you have to understand that environment comes second after safety, and which is something that is crazy for me, because there is no safety, there is no environment either. Like this is truly deeply linked together, and it's not like humans against environment. It shouldn't be that way, and we are working very hard to untie this narrative. So the beginning, anyhow, we were all closed. Like they were all closed. So it sort of gave us some time to step down, read, consult with public health departments. And we eventually found out that nobody had the answer written somewhere, saying what is safe and what's not. So that's why we decided to create a guide, which is like the guide for safe use of reusable, COVID or not. Because if you are having proper processes for flu and gastroenteritis and any kind of virus or bacteria, then you are safe for COVID as well. So we got together with several experts and with the public health. They came to the table. We were very happy about this. And we basically put in one place information that already existed, but that were like sort of lost in the noise of the media and the Starbucks and the blah, blah, blah. And so we said, okay, this is how you deal with a container coming from outside, and that's it. COVID, not COVID. So now we were able to start again with the program. And I would say that all of the coffee shop owners or restaurant owners who were deeply understanding before the pandemic the value of ecological transition, they never stopped. They didn't need to be convinced. But all the ones who were sort of going with the marketing, kind of glow, and who were into it more to answer the customer pressure than really to deeply change their processes, they were gone. Like because the customer are not asking anymore, because the customer is convinced that is not possible. And when you're going into shops now and they tell you, the ministry doesn't want to, we are not allowed by the institutions. I'm like, which institutions? They are not allowed, we cannot. And it's like really back to urban legends as we faced like 10 years ago, about all these discourses about, you cannot bring reusable and it's not safe and blah, blah, blah. So it's really frustrating to see all these urban legends coming back. But at the same time, a revolution is, it's not like a straight line, it goes like this. And I can feel that we are not going completely back. I can feel that many they're not going to change. They understood and they keep going. And even like the local authorities, City of Montreal, we make sure with them that their agenda about banishing disposable is still there. So we're really happy to see that it's not complete backwards.
So yeah, you raised some really important points here, that this sort of urban legends and just misinformation and providing clear information in one spot can really help reassure people. Pedro, I want to ask you, from like a psychology perspective, just thinking about what can help people get over this fear of this unknown, scary health problem, and also, deal with these sort of simple biases in our heads about reusable bad, disposable good. Is information and providing information enough? What do people need to really get over those fears?
So I think first of all, we have to understand that humans, we are exposed to this phenomenon called herd mentality, right? Like imagine that you are in the middle of a plaza, or like Eden Center for those Torontonians, and then you see like 300 people running that way. And you're standing there. Like you don't stop and wonder, like, are they going the right way? Like you run, you go. And as you run, you wonder, am I going the right way, right? But instinctively, you're running for your life. So while we are automatically reacting, we are running that way. And this is what a lot of people are doing out of fear, because we either don't know better or don't have the information required, don't know how to search, who to ask, or who to trust. So yes, information, I think that is vital so that we can make informed choices, but also taking a step back and noticing that we are afraid, right? Because we are all afraid for different reasons. If it's not health, it's our economy, it's our job, it's our family, environment, but we are in a constant state of fear. And in my perspective, if we don't take a step back and notice that, it'll be difficult for us to take proper action and respond with choices that are conscious and that are focused properly. Because again, in a moment like this, when everyone is being impacted, we are all subject to some sort of fear. So I would say, yeah, like taking a step back, acknowledging that we are afraid for whatever reason it is, and seek proper information.
That's a really good point. I think it's, I know I really like one of the premises of the Zero Waste Cafe is about open and friendly conversation, and not having to show up and be like this super zero waste warrior, to be able to ask questions and be open about things. And I think that's really important to help more people have a safe space to ask those questions. So Tony, I want to ask you, I know you've been campaigning for plastic-free Toronto for a while, and you've got this also from your experience talking to people about health issues. What do you think about the role of how we can help people understand how reusables are safe and think about the real risks in a way that's maybe not threatening? And how can we help move the needle so more people stop and ask, why am I running this way? Is there really something that I should be running from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have a definitive answer. I think there's a few things that I think we should all be doing. And so those of us who are in this space who understand the situation, as much as possible, sharing the information with the people in your closest circles, people are more likely to listen to their friends, frankly, most of the time than they are to listen to authorities, which is not to say people don't listen to authorities, but it's just sometimes, having that personal connection with someone is a really important thing to really receive that message. So when you are out and about, when you are talking with your family and your friends, really do mention hey, look guys, I know it's really hard to use reusables, but they're safe. they're convenient, they're not going to ruin the earth, like all these sorts of things. And then I think in terms of like, we're all online these days, social media is an important aspect to sharing information and getting the message out there. I have recently discovered reels are a very good way to share information. I hate making them, but go where the people are. So like if you are someone who likes to create, create things like infomercials or what have you, like fun videos that makes this inviting, because as much as possible, like everyone could use a little levity and joy these days. I feel like, as much as possible, if you can bring it into that space, because frankly, like this is exciting, like people using reusables and, taking action to both like save the earth and also, protect themselves and their families. Like these are all important and they should be fun things in my opinion. I'm probably biased as a doctor, but like, frankly, I think it's great. So like all of those little things I think are going to be important. There's a lot of regulations going around right now. So the federal government proposal you'd mentioned earlier, like in terms of the single-use plastic ban, they are accepting comments until I think December 6th. If you have any interest in talking to your politicians, now would be the time to just say like, hey, look, we still want the single-use plastic ban. Hey, look, we think it should be a lot more than these 6 items that you've put on this list because that's not sufficient. Hey, look, like we don't have time for this. Like, hey, look, yeah, we understand it's a pandemic, but like, do you know that the evidence shows that there's no actual contact transmission happening? So, we really don't need to be worried about that. Like there are many things we could be saying to our politicians. That's on a national level. In Ontario, there's the new Blue Box program, which has a lot of implications for packaging going forward in terms of basically shifting responsibility to corporations to essentially deal with all of the plastic waste that they are generating, which if we did it right would have the impact of actually forcing those corporations to reduce some of their plastic waste. So there is some opportunities to comment on that as well. I know Toronto Environmental Alliance has a very nice email already drafted. Please go sign it. It's in my bio on Instagram. Like there are ways, people. I talked for a really long time. I'm going to stop now. Many different options here.
Thank you. I appreciate that you plugged the T action and also the Greenpeace action. I think it's a really good point though. We're talking about how we can, people trust those people around them. You're right. That's a really good point. Talking to people or just seeing someone carrying a reusable container says, oh, that is safe. Oh, cool. We can do that again. So I think that's great. And I think also pushing for action at the government level. Sarah, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about, policy change? And actually, maybe I'll make the question a little bit harder for you, Sarah. I know Tim Hortons and Burger King and a few big chains have announced that they're going to start using reusable takeout containers. I have slightly mixed feelings about it. I think it's nice. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure, yeah. Okay, I'll start there and then I'll go to the federal ban stuff that's happening or not happening. So that was a really interesting development, I would say, with Restaurant Brands International that owns Burger King and Tim Hortons and Popeyes, I think, making that announcement that they'll pilot a reusable cup and container share program in Toronto next year. And this is something that Greenpeace and other organizations have been asking for a while, for them to actually make a commitment to plastic reduction and to commit to not just replace single-use plastic with another type of disposable, but actually phase out all disposables and move to reuse systems. So I would say it was a pleasant surprise to see that they actually are starting to pilot that kind of a system, because obviously a company as large as Tim Hortons, moving in that direction, if it is successful, and if it also prompts some of the other major coffee chains and other fast food chains to get on board, or they see that it's a model that could work, we could really see sector-wide movement, I would say, over the next year or so. But, like most corporate commitments, there's definitely a lot of flags, I would say. One is that they, at this point, well, for one thing, it's only a pilot in like a few locations in Toronto. So, it's not like this is going to be replacing a significant number of single-use cups and lids, et cetera, that we know there are, so billions of them that go out the door every year. But it does have the potential, I would say, to start to reduce their plastic footprint. But the problem is that with their current pilot, they aren't sort of doing a test cafe where it's only reusables. And so it kind of goes back, to herd mentality and, some of what Pedro's been talking about, which is if you're used to going into a restaurant and the easier choice is a disposable, and everyone else is just going for the disposable, and there's not, too many incentives to go for the reusable option, it really seems that they're setting the program up to fail by not having, periods of time that are really focused only on reuse and promoting those options to really test it to see if their customers engage in those systems. So that was really disappointing to see. And I think, also, I guess, just overall, the fact that the company isn't setting overall plastic reduction targets and making a real commitment to say, you know what, we're piloting it this year, but we want to move by 2022 to, have these types of systems across the country. It just shows that, are they really committed to this, or are they piloting it to kind of tick a box and say they tried? We shall see. But it's definitely concerning, I would say. And then at the federal level, the plan that they released really focused on recycling, improving recycling, improving recycled content in plastic products, but it's so focused on end of pipe and what to do with the plastic waste once it's there. Or once it's already created, or, how do we make plastic better? How do we make sure that we can keep plastics in the economy and try to have less of it go to landfill and less of it leak into the environment? Unfortunately, is a real missed opportunity to actually, take bold action and focus on reduction. I would say the most glaring omission from the whole plan was the lack of investment in reuse systems and a transition to truly circular models, as opposed to the, circular plastic economy that they, are telling a story can exist, which we know can't exist. So, we have launched an email to go to Minister Wilkinson, and the public consultation that actually closes December 9th. So there's a little bit of time, and I'll share the link in the chat. But I really encourage folks to send a message if you haven't. And one of the big things we're asking for, other than, of course, setting reduction targets, is investment in reuse systems and incentivizing that transition.
Thanks, Sarah. Just to add in my own comment here really quick, one thing I've noticed sometimes with voluntary corporate initiatives is that they can sometimes be done as a way to avoid regulation. So companies can say, hey, we don't need you to regulate this area and tell us to reduce plastic. We're already doing these amazing things. So it's a way to take a bit of pressure off the public pushing for real change. So I like to think more like, hey, Tim Hortons can do it. Why don't we force all businesses to do this? So we can kind of flip it on them and say, if they can prove it can be done, they should be able to do it everywhere. So I think that's one thinking about it. In terms of the Ontario Blue Box regulation, one good thing that I remembered, one of the details in there, although there's always a question, you can put great things in a regulation, but if there's not really good verification, it's hard to know how well it'll work. But companies that use reusable containers, so in the Ontario Blue Box regulation, companies will be responsible for collecting all the packaging materials they put on the market. And if a company uses reusables, they'll be able to meet their target by getting those reusables. So companies that have reusable containers would be able to avoid the cost of recycling, collection, and all that downstream costs. So that might be a good way to incent more reusables. Again, we'll have to see how it actually rolls out, because this government isn't super good about enforcing detailed environmental regulations, but something that if you want to use our draft petition, you can comment. We want more support for refillables and reusables, and tell it to the federal government too. I think all levels of government are hearing from the public right now. So I guess that's another question for us all to think about right here. And I'd love to hear maybe from Pedro. I know, I think your husband recently started a restaurant, and I don't know if he started just before the pandemic or during the pandemic, but it's a really tough year to be a restaurant. I'd love to talk about some of these smaller scale reusable programs like Tasse, and things that aren't done by a big corporation as a sort of greenwashing thing, but an actual local business really looking for sustainable solutions. If maybe you can speak from a business perspective, what would help you switch to a reusable container for takeout programs?
That's a deep question that sounds very, very superficial, but is very, very deep. Yes, my husband and I started a restaurant just before the pandemic. It was like perfect timing. Yeah, and we actually didn't do takeout or delivery for the first months because we were really looking for an option that could be the most environmentally aware. And like Erika and us, we had like a ton of discussions about how to incorporate the boxes and how to make it actually proper, right? So that people could have the certainty that whatever was being delivered to them could be properly delivered, but also properly taken care of. And with the whole experience that a restaurant to go provides you with, right? To be honest, it has been, there are not a lot of resources out there. Like our only resource was Erika in that moment, which we exploited completely. But there are not a lot of resources, not a lot of our peers were doing it. There's a lot of perceived inconvenience from the restaurant community in saying like, hey, like, no, this is added cost, this is added labor, this is added storage, and a lot of things among the bazillion things that restaurateurs have to do. So our experience is that it really takes a commitment, like a willingness from a business owner perspective to actually push this, because once you find the resource, like in our case is Erika, it's very easily implemented from an operational point of view, right? But I'm going to tell you some of the barriers that have been found. Like, of course, COVID just came and made a revolution out of everything. But when you order disposable containers and they are priced like 0.6 cents instead of 0.9, and then you multiply them by 1,000, right? Like, that margin is something that business owners really look at. And again, like it was our experience that we did not have in the beginning numbers that could compare both scenarios. So to make my very long, potentially long answer very, very short, I guess that people like Aurore and Erika and Inwit that are providing pre-tested solutions is what people like restaurateurs need, right? And it's mostly about just like trying it out, because I'm breaking the barrier of people wanting to try it out. I'm gonna switch hats right now and just like talk more about perception and in a psychological perception. People also don't want to be responsible for their own waste. Right? It is a barrier that if I'm going somewhere and I'm going to have to take my container with me, people don't always want to be responsible for the leftovers, right? And that is a barrier that we have also found, that people want it easy and want to toss it away, other than people that are committed and say like, hey, like, yeah, I'll bring my container with me wherever I'm going and take care of it, right? So those are some barriers that we have found. And like, even our peers stretching to make an effort to find compostable containers is a stretch for most restaurateurs. Like, I have not seen many that actually do research into their packaging being either like really compostable or the least amount of impact, or that their production is sustainable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. There was actually a really cool program in the US called Rethink Disposables, and it was about going to businesses. And one of the biggest things that they found was just showing a business, this is how much it costs for a disposable, and here's how much it costs for a reusable if you use it 10 times or 100 times. And very few people have actually put those numbers side by side. And when you put it side by side, it becomes really clear and obvious. So there's these sort of perceptions, not just of safety, but also of cost, that somehow disposables are cheaper. Even if you have to have an entire storage room for all those disposable containers in the back of the restaurant, which is a lot of space, you know, it's still this idea that it's cheaper. Aurore, do you have that experience when you're talking with businesses? So you mentioned providing information about reusables being safe. Do you also have to dispel myths or just do some basic education about the costs and the convenience of the whole system?
That's one of the first things we're telling them, look at your numbers. Because when they put the order of disposable, it's in the same order as dishwashing liquid and toilet paper and everything. It sort of all goes down. And that's the first thing we're telling them. Look at how much it costs for you every year. And also to kind of change this, what Pedro was talking about, the idea of, oh, it's gone, it's not our problem anymore. We remind them that it's their name and their logo in the trash. And, you know, there is no restaurant owners who started their business to pollute. You know, it's not what they did. They want to share food, they want to share happiness and good products and etc. They don't want to, be waste providers, and that's not what they want. So when we sort of take off the glasses and say, look, this thing is not disappearing, it's still there, then the conversation is easier to start. But yeah, of course, disposable will always win the simplicity battle, unfortunately, and that's why it's been spreading so much, because it's so freaking simple to just throw it out. That's why we need to work on the narrative and not just the logistics. We cannot win the logistic battle. We have to work on the narrative. And also the economics can be a good point. So yeah, I completely agree with what these wonderful
answer.
people said. Yeah.
Thank you. Tony, I saw you really getting into that answer there. Do you want to, I guess, one more question, I guess I have got a little bit of time left, but I still want to ask, I guess, thinking about the environmental impact of disposables and the health impact of disposables. Can you talk a little bit about, are disposables healthier in some contexts? What would you say to people to get them thinking about, maybe shifting perceptions around disposables being healthier, better? I don't know. Maybe my question isn't very well formulated.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
Okay, cool.
I think and this is maybe not going to be quite the answer. I don't know. Let me know if this is a good answer or not, and we can go from there. But I think a lot of the time we don't think of ourselves as humans as part of a larger system. And we think of our health as this very separate thing from our larger systems, which is just patently false. So the fact that we have, billions of tons of plastic everywhere, literally everywhere, guys, we're breathing this in, we're eating it. It's in our soils, which is killing our microbes. It's literally just everywhere. And to think that that's not having an impact on our health is one of those moments of but how could it not be? We don't have the studies yet because it's a fairly new problem that we have plastic on this scale. But I think it would be a shocking level of arrogance to think it is not having an impact on our health. So at some point, we're going to have to start to reframe our health as part of a larger context of the planet's health and everyone else around us health, because they're all the same thing, guys. Like there's no my health and then I'm just in this bubble of happiness and joy and like the rest of the world doesn't exist anymore. Like that's not a thing. So yeah, we're gonna, and I think that's what's really killed me about COVID is that we're making these, and I get it, like it's a threatening time, it's a frightening time, but like we're making all of these decisions on a very short time scale without really looking at what are the impacts on our health in the long run in terms of like our use now of all sorts of single-use plastics and, you know, plastic gloves and all these things that we weren't doing before this pandemic that we're now doing in massive proportion. And like, I get it, right? Like we're making some trade-offs in the short term, but like, we need to start thinking a bit broader here. We need to start thinking long-term because inevitably these things are going to come back and cause more problems for us.
Great, thank you. I like how you say that it's funny how we compartmentalize. This is the thing I'm doing to be healthy, and this is what I'm doing for my economic health or for whatever, but we're still just humans on a planet and it's all the same.
It's all connected.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for framing it that way. So for a sort of wrapping up kind of question, I'd love to just ask each of you to say, are you totally comfortable using reusables? Would you pay more for reusables? Do you think that this is really like something we need to model more in our own lives, or do you, maybe if anyone is willing to admit that they occasionally still use disposables in these current times? Sarah, maybe you can go first.
Sure. Yes, totally comfortable on board with reusables. But, you know, I will admit that like so many people at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, what are we doing here? You know, can I still take my cup? And it was less about the reusable itself. It was more about wondering if those companies had thought through their reusable approach. Like if they actually, whether it's the bring your own cup, or I think it's less so the companies that were driving reuse initiatives themselves, but more when they were relying on customers to bring their reusables, where it was clear that they were putting all the responsibility on the customer to be, bringing in a clean cup and all of that, and not taking the reins and really, really making sure that any reuse systems they had met health and safety requirements. So that was where I hesitated in the beginning, but then it became clear that, as it's been said many times today, it's not about the vessel. It's about employing basic hygiene. And we can't every single time there's a public health concern, we can't just roll back all of our efforts to achieve our other environmental and social justice goals. And what we know about disposable plastic is that from extraction all the way through to even when it's polluting, it's contributing to the climate crisis, the plastic pollution crisis, the biodiversity crisis, other health crises in communities around the world. So, unless we are committed to these more sustainable systems that actually can operate more in tune with nature, then we're doomed. So that was my long way of saying, yes, I'm very committed to reuse systems. And I'm excited to see that the movement is still growing, even though we've had this minor blip in our journey.
Pedro, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I would say that commitment-wise, yes, fully. But I will also acknowledge that it's a habit thing, right? It is not about we have maybe 20 Tupperwares that we have allotted for this, right? And I mean, not right now because I work from home a lot, but before we used to take our containers everywhere. Though I will acknowledge that it is a thing, it's a habit that you need to make, and that at times we falter, and more so during the pandemic, we find ourselves so exhausted of so many things that we do, and we have done resource to what do we eat today? We didn't go to get groceries, and we order in, and that supposes waste, right? Yeah, it is a reality.
Great. Aurore?
Yeah, I succeeded in unmuting. Short answer, yeah, because it makes sense even on an hygiene point of view. When it all started, my logic was, hold on a second, this is super scary. I need to be in control. I can control the hygiene of this reusable thing. I can reset its hygiene every time I'm washing it. I don't know what happens with those other materials that I'm grabbing on shelves. And it was very fascinating to me to talk to people around me and realize how much they are convinced that this object starts its life when they grab it. It's like, oh, it's my packet of pasta. I'm the first one to touch it. It was virgin before me. No, it wasn't. It came from a very long supply chain, from a very distant place where nothing is made in medical, hygiene, whatever. Like, so it was very fascinating to me to realize this. And it's the same that after trash, it does not exist anymore. Yes, it does. So yeah, short answer, in terms of controlling my process and controlling my health, I feel definitely more safe with reusables. And maybe something that we haven't talked about, and I will be very short, I promise, but I'm sort of saw also a lot of discourse about, oh, we care about the environment and we care about safety, etc. So we are moving to compostable. I'm like, no, what? And it's sort of in the same way that you have this magic ideas, there is this magic idea that a compostable items is going to turn into a carrot somewhere and it's all going to be beautiful. And I mean, no, it's not. Like, compostable items are items that required agricultural grounds, tons and tons of water and transportation and everything, and they do not make more sense than disposable plastic either. They do not. And most of the time, end of life, they just act as contamination for compostable industries because they do not compost in a very short time as a carrot. So yeah, I just want to emphasize, be careful about the magical items that do not require you to change anything. Yes, we will have to all change the way we consume and the way we offer food if we want to make it really sustainable. And we will have to understand that circular economy is not recycling. It's just not. And it's really infuriating at the moment to see all this policies, even in the federal and very high levels, to really put together circular economy with BS, because circular economy is about reducing, is about functional economy, is about sharing economy. It's not about better recycling. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Aurore. Fantastic. Good comments. And yeah, just for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, Aurore, alluded to this, but compostables, unfortunately, are, like any single-use replacement, are just a really attractive distraction. And unfortunately, there's actually a lot of new research that's showing that compostable containers sometimes are actually more toxic than plastic because of certain types of nonstick coatings that are put on them. And I've heard in the US, there's been some compost sites that have had to stop accepting any sort of food packaging because the levels of this toxic chemical are so high that they're not even meeting federal toxic standards. So it can be pretty scary. We're just swapping one problem for another. Okay, Tony, last comment from you then about, do you trust reusables?
Yes, I'm going to keep this very short. Yes, I trust reusables. Yes, I'd pay more for them, but also not everyone can pay more for them. So those of us who can should, and also we should look at, how we improve access in general.
Amazing. Glad you got that in there. We've got some follow-up questions on this. That's perfect. But thank you, everybody. This has been so exciting. We've got a bunch of questions coming in from the audience, but I'm going to hand it over to Adriana right now, and we've got a quick poll for you, I think.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Emily. That was fantastic and very engaging conversation. I'm actually excited to go back and watch it all over again. But in the meantime, we want to kind of get a feel for how everyone is feeling right now. So Rommel, if you want to put up a poll, we're just going to do a quick survey and see how you're all feeling about reusables. We heard from our panelists. We know how they're feeling. So we want to get a feel for you. So take a moment and let us know if you're feeling comfortable or uncomfortable. No pressure at all. This is just to kind of gauge the crowd, so you just be honest and transparent with that. And we're actually been gathering all of your questions. So we're going to get started on those. Just a reminder that if you do have questions, that please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. The chat has been very active, as we hoped it would be. Thank you for that. But just so that they don't get lost, we want to make sure we get to your questions, because we know there's a lot of links and suggestions in the chat. So that would be fantastic. We're going to give everyone, I think, about 20 more seconds to complete that poll, and then Rommel is going to let us know how everyone is feeling, and then we will dive into the questions. And we've got some pretty detailed ones here, which is fantastic. Again, please don't hesitate to throw them in the chat box. Here we go. All right, so we have 98% of our attendees right now are feeling comfortable and thinking that reusables are safe, which is incredible. We're really happy to hear that, obviously. As we've heard today, it seems as though they are definitely safe, as long as we are employing proper cleanliness, which we would do no matter what we were using, whether we were sitting on a patio or taking out a container for takeout food. So I'm going to pass this back to Emily. We're going to start going through some of these fantastic questions. I hope you're all ready for the hot seat. Is everyone ready? I'm just joking. It's not a hot seat. Okay. I'm going to turn my video off so that you can connect with everyone on the panel, and I'll see you in a little bit.
All right. Well, Tony, since you raised it as like your closing comment, you tried to give a really short answer. You get the first comment on the next question, which is talking about the cost of reusables. So, a lot of these reusable containers, we've got a few questions come in that kind of get at this. So sometimes these programs require a hefty deposit. If it's a reusable program that's run by a restaurant, they might require a big deposit for people to take that takeout container, for the customers to take it home and then bring it back, or for people to invest in really high quality reusable containers that they can use to bring to restaurants. They require people to be able to carry those containers around. So there's some questions about economic and then also like physical accessibility of reusables. Do you have any comments on what we should think about for those?
Yeah. Physical accessibility wise, like, there are always going to be some people who need plastic straws to be able to drink safely. There are just medical conditions where that is just in fact true, and none of the other reusable alternatives are in fact safe. So that's fine. It's important to keep those in mind. It's important to consult those communities when we're making regulations, so that we don't, just leave them out of the conversation, and then it turns out that we've missed a huge important discussion piece. Like, we should always have these people at the table. In terms of the cost piece, yes, I think this is an important discussion to have. People have different levels of privilege, and that's always going to be true, which is going to impact what they are able to do at any given point. Often we place the onus of responsibility to make better choices on individuals, which is, in my opinion, often problematic, because again, there are varied levels of privileges. And so then to point out at certain people for not doing the right thing is an unfair discussion. And frankly, we should move that discussion upstream, which is what I think a lot of us have been getting at tonight anyways, so that the onus of responsibility is not on the person, it's on the corporations and our governments and all of these other sort of structures that we put in place to enable everyone to have a good quality of life. I think it's important to remember that that is supposed to be the function of our government, is in fact to guarantee a livable state for all people in this country. So, you know, like, I think at the end of the day, like reusables are important. You know, those of us who can invest in, you know, our fancy containers and paying our deposit fees, like, these are all great things. Do I think the individual action is going to be sufficient? I do not. And I also do not think it is fair to expect everyone to be able to do this. That is also not fair. So that is where I will leave that.
Nice. Anyone else want to jump in on the issue of equity and access to reusables? Well,
I'll just say that I really think Tony nailed it there. But yeah, I guess I'll just add that, you know, going back to what I was saying about what lacks from the federal plan is, you know, investment to transition, you know, different sectors more to reuse systems, and to help scale some of the, you know, the types of systems that we know exist, but have them actually scale so that there is more access. And yeah, this is such a common issue that comes up across sectors, I would say, where, you know, the company, you know, even if we don't think about it, often we are paying, because of extended producer responsibility, we are paying a little bit more for packaging, even for disposable packaging, as consumers. And so really the cost is always put back on the consumer, but it is time that the companies actually start funding these initiatives, investing in these initiatives, and that the government is supporting, as I say, that transition.
Great point. Another thing I like to add to remind people sometimes is that even if you're not officially paying for it through the price tag of a product, we're all paying for it in terms of environmental harm and the environmental cost of cleanup and the environmental impact of all that upstream resource extraction. And right now that's sort of an acceptable thing that we're all sort of publicly paying for. And I just think, no, I think I'd rather have it embedded in the price of a product. So someone has to make that choice. Okay, so there's so many great questions. It's hard to pick which one to go with next. Anybody, just a quick rapid fire conversation. Does anybody want to name out some of the successful reusable programs that are running in Ontario or in Canada? Anybody know some projects that are running? I know it's kind of new. We've got Tasse in Montreal. Is it outside Montreal as well?
All in Quebec.
Amazing.
And it's good to know that it's not most of our members are outside Montreal. So they are outside the big city. We've got 2/3 of the members outside Montreal. So it's not just big cities or like fancy coffee shops with milk special or whatever, you know.
That's great. Great. Sarah, Pedro, Tony, do you guys know any quick names of programs? Oh, sorry, Aurore, did you have more?
No, I mean, I know there is obviously the project coming from Erica that is amazing, and Erica has been such an amazing fighter for this for years now. We met, I mean, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and she's been pushing it with a lot of passion in Ontario, and it's amazing. And there is the NULA project in BC. There is MugShare as well. There are different ones starting in Canada, and it's super cool also to identify that we talk to each other. We don't address each other as competitors. We really help each other. We have a Slack channel where we help each other out, because it's going to take a bunch of solutions to take on the disposable problem. It's not going to be like one miracle company, one Tim Hortons solution or whatever. We need to address it on multiple angles. And if you have an idea, please talk to us. We will be more than happy to help.
Great. Excellent invitation. Sarah, do you know of any big ones out there in BC?
Well, other than the ones that Aurore mentioned, definitely our zero waste grocery stores out here. So the well-known soap dispensary, Nada, some other grocery delivery chains have been operating. They definitely adjusted at the beginning, but they're still, offering their package-free options, which is great. And then a larger one that, going back to the commitment with Tim Hortons, and Loop. Loop has been, for those that don't know Loop is, it's kind of hard. How do I describe Loop? It's a partnership between TerraCycle and a bunch of different companies rather, that are working together to basically do reusable delivery and pickup systems piloting it in different cities across the world, and with different products. So products either like, everything from Haagen-Dazs to shampoo to other known brands, and Loblaw is going to be coming on board, and now Tim Hortons. Anyway, just to say that there are pros and cons, I would say, with that model. But one thing that's been great is they've been really vocal about how, because they created their whole model with health and safety in mind, as part of their overall objectives, and what they wanted to achieve, they've been able to totally operate fine during COVID. And it's great to see those, a big player like that be really vocal and kind of squashing some of those other stories that are being told about how those kinds of, return schemes can't operate at this time. So
it sounds like sort of maybe, I guess, okay, there's so many good questions. Okay. I want to ask Pedro this. With something like a tax or a fee, or can you talk about some of the nudges that can be given to consumers to choose reusables? A fee or a discount, or do you think those are things that would really help make more people think a quick second on why they're running that direction?
We tend to respond better to added value than to discounted prices. Okay. It depends on and this is more a marketing answer than a psych answer. But to be honest, and again, marketing is very much psychological, but we tend to respond better to, if you like get this and I will give you more for the value, than get the same and I will charge you less. It's a different perception, but we tend to go more for more value than for less price. And again, it depends on the demographic, which is something that we always should consider, because marketing cannot take a blanket approach, and there's a lot of diversity and marginalization in groups and populations that do not have the same possibility to choose more value over less price. So I would say that it really depends on which you're talking to. But going back to what Tony was saying, I'm not really sure if that is something that clients should have to decide, right? Because I mean, as you folks were speaking, I was thinking about equity, and it should be possible for all the population to have the same end goal, which is like have a quality product that is safe for you, for your health, meaning like the ecosystemic health. But we're not all standing in the same position to choose. So we should not have to choose from different positions. That choice should be made upstream, so that it is delivered to all the assortment and diversity of people in the same way, with the same quality, with the same safety. Though I know that it's a long stretch and it will not be immediate. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, I really, I love your answer, because I really like the way you said that, right? That we shouldn't all have to, we're not all standing in the same position, and we shouldn't all be asked to make the same choice from our different positions. And it's true, there's so much about consumer culture and companies telling us that it's our choice, and it's our choice to be more sustainable, and it's our choice to carry things. And what I'm hearing each of you have said in different ways today is that we need to create the systems so it's not just an individual who's faced with this guilt. And this is a bigger problem. It shouldn't be left up to individual choices. not because people can't be trusted, but because people have busy lives and they have other things to think about. And we can't put this all on individuals because we didn't all create this individually. It's a system problem.
And if I may, I mean, it is very hard to. It's not that people can be trusted, but we have needs, and before we cross the threshold of being safe, we always prioritize safety. I mean, I say this like I come from Mexico. It's a different reality. During the pandemic, there was like this whole massive campaign about people cannot quarantine because either they go out or they die out of starvation, right? So if we consider all the diversity and assortment of realities that we have, not all of us have the position of saying, hey, am I going to choose either reusable or eco-friendly, or because for a lot of people it's a matter of safety. I mean, it's a matter of survival. For me, because I have some privilege, I can afford to say, hey, I'm going to buy this in advance because I can. But if I was in a different position, then I would be thinking, what do I need to survive today? And I would not be able to have a perception of my whole ecosystem and what that implies. So again, we have different realities, and questions we should not be having to answer these questions individually. It's not the same question for everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. We're actually just out of time now. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I had a really fun time. I think like Adriana, or one of the many Adrianas that joined us today, I'm probably going to watch this again later. But I love that all of you talked about issues of equity and systems, and also just like really friendly ways of thinking about this and not feeling guilty, but also really solution focused. And like, this is a really surprisingly deep conversation. I liked it. So thank you, everybody. And thanks for having me as the moderator. It was really fun.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, everyone. Really, we want to extend a big thank you to all our panelists. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Aurore. Thank you, Tony. And of course, thank you, Emily. You were a great moderator. Our conversation of tonight was super inspirational. I love it. Thank you, Romel, for all your help. Thank you, Greenpeace, for co-hosting this event with us. And lastly, thank you, everyone, for showing up and care deeply about the future of reusable systems and this incredible planet we call home.
Yeah, and if you want to stay up to date on the new program that Erica and I are launching, INWIT, please, we will send you a link. You can sign up for a newsletter, and you will be the first to find out about our launch date in January, and the first one to find out about what neighborhoods we'll be heading to first. So we will send that out to you as well. And again, thank you everyone so much for being here, and thank you again for joining us. Have a great rest of your evening. Please stay safe, and we hope to see you all soon.